Good afternoon and welcome to our first e-learning experience here at the Grange. Today we're going to talk about essay writing. Most of 1medio will, in IGCSE, spend a lot of time writing essays. And I think it's very important for us to make quite clear the process of writing the essay and the best format and the best way in which to do it. Next week you have an IGCSE essay examination on the Crucible, which is an exam text. So I'd like to show you today is the best way in which to write an essay, the best way to embed your quotation, the best way to create an introduction and a conclusion so that it will help you in the long run. The concept of the e-learning idea is that we can put it on net and that you can access it at home at any time in which you want to study or anytime you're unsure about how to write an essay. So, next week our topic is going to be the Crucible. The essay will be on the first act of the Crucible, so I've created another similar essay type or essay question in which we can look at today. This question we're going to look at today is discuss the establishment of Act 1 of the Crucible. Most of you are quite clear, and you should know by now, this format that we see on the screen. On the screen, as we know, we have what I like to call the sandwich format of the essay. Now, there will be many teachers who will teach it in different ways, but this is the way in which I normally do it. Basically, you have one triangle, an upside-down inverted triangle, three main body paragraphs or arguments, and then a regular triangle. The triangle represents the introduction. In this case, the introduction starts general, therefore it's wider, and then works down to the point of the inverted triangle, which is the thesis statement. Now that's where you have to be really precise and tell the reader exactly what you're going to say. Of course, the body paragraph is the development of your thesis statement. Your thesis statement should have at least 2 or 3 main arguments in which you will develop in each body paragraph. In the conclusion, you are going to start with a general restatement of the thesis statement, and then, of course, you are going to expand in the opposite way in which you did the introduction. So, let's start. First of all, the introduction. You look at the question, discuss the establishment of the theme of power in Act 1 of the Crucible. Now, obviously, you're going to be looking at only Act 1, and you have to think to yourself, how can I organize my introduction, and how can I organize my essay? You will probably go through a short time in which you will brainstorm your ideas, and then you'll come up with some kind of introduction. In this case, all right, the introduction, it says, look at, in this case, in the introduction, what we're going to do is we're going to look at the power in the play, the role of power in the play, a brief summary of the play in the introduction, and then introduce the main characters related to the theme. So again, make sure in the beginning of an essay, especially an IGCSE essay where you only have 45 minutes, to write this essay, you have to go directly to the point. You must say where you're taking the extract is from, the author of the work, and the title of the work. That would be more general. Then you could talk maybe a couple sentences about the general concepts of the essay. Then you're going to be more specific, brief summary of the play, Then you're going to be more specific and talk about the specific characters. In this case, we're going to use characters. Specific characters in which you would use in your essay. Now here we have an example of an introduction. All right? The introduction would be something like this. In Act 1 of Arthur Miller's The Crucible, the theme of power is firmly established through the characterization of Reverend Paris. In the theocracy that was the 17th century Salem, the head of the parish was seen as both spiritual and administrative leader and therefore commanded general power and responsibility. In the play, Paris's desperation to keep control over this congregation sets him up as the principal antagonist of the tragedy. With the threat of witchcraft in his household, he becomes hysterical about his self-preservation. In addition to Paris, 2 other characters, Abigail and Tituba, are closely related to the theme, as Abigail uses power to control her peers, while Tituba uses power to save herself. Now, in this introduction, hopefully it's quite clear the 3 areas in which you're going to be looking at. Remember that we said in the introduction, there's going to be a brief summary of the play, an introduction to the main characters. Now, here you can clearly see the title of the work is mentioned, where the work is found in Act 1, and also the author. It directly refers to the principal character, Reverend Paris. Now, the second sentence is perhaps more general. It shows the same idea of the inverted triangle. It's starting more general and going to more specific. Quite clearly, again, the 3 characters are mentioned. Paris, who will be discussed in paragraph 1, Abigail, who will be discussed in paragraph 2, and Tituba, who will be discussed in paragraph 3. So here you can see that it's quite clear from the introduction exactly what is going to be mentioned and in what order. Notice also that the introduction is very, very short. You are not going to spend too much time in an IGCSE essay spending time on the introduction, because you have a limited amount of time in which you can prove your evidence from the body of the paragraph. Hopefully from this, it's clear the way in which the introduction should go. Okay. One of the hard things that I find for students in IGCSE and in all levels actually, IGCSE and A level, is for the text. Provided evidence can be the most challenging because you are faced with especially Act 1, which is 40 pages, you're faced with a lot of information and not a lot of time in which to get it. So, first of all, what I suggest to my students, and hopefully demand sometimes, is that you study the text before you write the test. You familiarize yourself where certain characters are speaking and what's happening in the plot. Once you've done that, it will be much quicker for you to find information. So, let's move on to the first body paragraph. First body paragraph, all right, is section 1. Now, as we said in the introduction, we know that the first body paragraph is going to be referring to Reverend Paris. In this case, we're going to talk about Reverend Paris. We're going to give examples of power and reference from the text for each, all right, and we're going to conclude with making a quick statement as to whether we think his power was justified. The second argument that we see in the text is going to be section 2. And in section 2, as mentioned in the introduction, is going to deal with Abigail Williams. In this case, we'll talk about examples of power and reference from the text, the same as paragraph 1. We'll talk about the result of her power and with reference from the text. And we will talk about the conclusion, was her use of power justified, and did she succeed in controlling her peers, as stated in the introduction. The third paragraph, section 3, as we know, will deal with Tituba. Same question. Example of power and reference from the text, results of her use of power, and was her power justified in saving herself. Now, because this is supposed to be a short tutorial, we're not going to deal with all 3 texts. We will instead deal with all 3 sections. We will deal instead with only with section 1, the main body. What I've done here, though, is hopefully give you an idea of how to break it down in its entirety. We're going to deal, however, only with section 1. So, going on to section 1, as I mentioned before, one of the most important things here is looking at the text, reading through it very quickly, but having a good general idea of where the information is that you're looking for. Remember, we must always keep in mind what our title is. And our title is Discussion of the Theme of Power in Act 1 of the Crucible. Oftentimes we get distracted by